Hallo, meine liebe Höllenbrut auf der anderen Seite des Bildschirms.
Willkommen zum letzten Teil unserer Top 10 der Menschen, die ich am meisten respektiere und die mich maßgeblich geprägt haben. Es wird Zeit für die Nummer 1. Ich denke, die meisten, die dieses Top 10 von Anfang an verfolgt haben, wissen bereits, wer auf diesem Thron sitzt oder ahnen es zumindest. Natürlich der Einzige, der Unvergleichliche, der Großartige, der viel zu früh von uns gegangene Hitch.
Platz 1. Christopher Hitchens.
Heilige Scheiße hat Hitch mich geprägt. Auch ihn habe ich seinerzeit durch Bill Mahers Polit-Talkshow kennengelernt. Und ich war zwar nicht mit seiner Einstellung zu Bushs Irakkrieg einer Meinung, konnte aber seine Argumentation nachvollziehen.
Christopher Hitchens joins us this morning, and we're here to talk with him about his views about Iraq. Well, you're talking to us on a week, of course, when the constitutional process is delayed, but this morning the AP ran a story of some encouragement that they think that they're going to break through and reach compromises, and also the day after some horrific bombings again in the country. What's your feeling about where all this stands right now, the policy?
Well, I haven't seen the AP report. I'm pleased to hear about it, but I know that the two examples you give are both essentially accurate, and they couldn't point a bigger contrast. In one case, Iraqis are trying to create not just a federal system that satisfies the needs of the differing ethnic and communal factions, but also a democratic federalism, an extraordinary thing even to be trying in that area. And on the other side, you have the most savage Islamist nihilism, largely, but not exclusively, inflicted by foreigners, by imports to the country, who would rather see Iraq bleed to death than to see this experiment succeed. So I think it's as simple as that, and one has to keep on asking people as politely as possible, which side are they on? And I've chosen mine, and I hope you can guess which one it is.
Aber seine ganze Art, seine Schlagfertigkeit, seine Intelligenz und Debattierfähigkeit, sein Humor und sein unglaublich umfangreiches Wissen, sowie seine Art, es bei passenden Anlässen einzusetzen, um seinen Gegnern den Boden unter den Füßen wegzuziehen, haben mich derart beeindruckt, dass ich mir gleich sein damals aktuelles Buch God is Not Great geholt und es innerhalb kürzester Zeit geradezu verschlungen habe. Dadurch bin ich auf seine anderen Bücher aufmerksam geworden, in denen er Henry Kissinger als den Kriegsverbrecher darstellt, der er auch ist, Mutter Teresa als die macht- und geldgierige Verbrecherin entlarvte, die sie war, und die Clintons ebenfalls als die macht- und geldbesessenen Lügenbarone entlarvte, die sie sind. Das Vanity Fair Video mit seinen alternativen 10 Geboten war klasse, eine Einhaltung dieser würde die Welt besser machen.
I'm Christopher Hitchens, and implausible though it may seem, I want to talk about the 10 commandments. Who am I, you may well ask, to instruct or advise you on these grave matters, but even Moses himself was a revisionist and issued at least 4 versions of the Decalogue, or the top 10. So if he can be a revisionist, well, so can I. Picture then, if you will, that I'm not just taking a blue pencil, but an actual chisel, and seeing if these tablets of stone could possibly stand a bit of an update for our time. Numbers 1 and 2 actually don't have anything to do with ethics at all. They are injunctions. They remind or instruct you that I am the Lord thy God, that thou shalt have no other gods before me, and they forbid the making of graven images. The commandment against the making of graven images, or images of God, is very upsetting to many Catholics who often leave this bit of the commandment out, because where would Christian art and devotional painting be if you couldn't make impressive images of God, his son, his son's mother? Then we are rather sternly ordered not to take the name of this God in vain, and it's then added rather superfluously that you won't be held guiltless if you do take the name of this Lord in vain. Well, no one has ever worked out exactly how to obey this commandment. Is it taking the Lord's name in vain to shout, God is great, while blowing yourself up and killing innocent people? Some say it's obedience to the law of God. When I say God knows, I really mean I think that nobody knows. It's usually wise when promulgating eternal laws to be clear about what you mean. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. The Christians who want this inscribed in courtrooms and in schoolrooms would end up taking Saturday off rather than Sunday, because this program of commandments is actually a program for the establishment of a fundamentalist Jewish state. Commandment number 5 enjoins that thou shalt honor thy father and thy mother, which seems reasonable enough. It's an interesting commandment because when given in full, it says that if you do so, you will have a longer tenure of the land that's been promised to you. It's one of the few commandments that comes with an inducement, if you will. It even seems to suggest that you should honor your father and mother because you expect a legacy from them. Number 6, thou shalt not kill. Almost immediately after the events at Sinai and the delivery of these instructions by God from the top of the mountain, Moses orders all his supporters to draw their swords and kill all their friends and brothers for their profanity. Number 7, thou shalt not commit adultery. The Turkish government, an Islamic party, recently tried to make this actual law in Turkey itself, but failed. It's difficult to see why this well-known offense should be classified with murder and theft and perjury. Usually the punishment for those who commit it is what you might call self-inflicted. Commandment number 8, thou shalt not steal. Very little to quarrel with here. We don't know of any society that has a commandment saying it's okay to steal, or a social custom that allows it. Then we arrive at a moment of comparatively rare nuance and sophistication. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. The idea of convicting someone who is innocent by bearing false testimony against them is and should be shocking to the entire human conscience. So this is not only one of the finest of the commandments, maybe the finest, but in its stress on the not and the false witness against, it shows a very rare and careful sense of the balance and scruple that's required for judgment and justice. The last of, at least this version of the Ten Commandments, is also sometimes famous by its number, number 10. It forbids the coveting of your neighbor's or thy neighbor's goods, these to include his ox, his ass, his wife. I think there may be 3 thinkable objections here. First, and most obvious, it considers the female of the human species to be equivalent to the chattel. Second, by way of objection, it's the only commandment that punishes thought. Here you're not forbidden to do anything. You're forbidden to think even about something. And third, the attempt to suppress an instinct, a desire that must have been put by God into us in the first place. Otherwise, how would we know? The essential division of opinion is this: did God make men, or did men make many gods? There are enough discrepancies just in the well-known version for us to be certain that we're looking here at a God who improvises, who's jealous, who's short of temper, who's inconsistent, or, if by any chance God didn't make Moses and the Hebrews, that the people who made God were jealous, short-tempered, inconsistent, and capricious in their turn. I don't know about you, but as between the consideration that man was made by God or that many gods were made by men, I've never thought there was much doubt as to which was the correct version. How might a Decalogue look if it was written for the 21st century? I never quite trust myself beginning a sentence by saying, thou shalt not, but let's see if we can adapt this famous question. Number 1, do not condemn people on the basis of their ethnicity or their color. Number 2, do not ever even think of using people as private property or as owned or as slaves. 3, despise those who use violence or the threat of it in sexual relations. Number 4, hide your face and weep if you dare to harm a child. Number 5, do not condemn people for their inborn nature. Why would God create so many homosexuals only in order to torture and destroy them. Number 6, be aware that you too are an animal and dependent on the web of nature. Try and think and act accordingly. Number 7, don't imagine that you can escape judgment if you rob people with a false prospectus rather than with a knife. Number 8, turn off that fucking cell phone. You can have no idea how unimportant your call is to us. Number 9, denounce all jihadists and crusaders for what they are. Psychopathic criminals with ugly delusions and terrible sexual repressions. Number 10, be willing to renounce any god or any faith if any holy commandments should contradict any of the above. In short, don't swallow your moral code in tablet form.
In seinen unzähligen Debatten ging er auch meist als Sieger hervor, selbst als er einmal gegen 4 Christen gleichzeitig antrat. Er zerlegte Tony Blair, Al Sharpton, Dinesh D'Souza und diverse Rabbis, Priester und Theologen genüsslich argumentativ in ihre Einzelteile und führte sie regelrecht vor.
Morally normal, even if they're morally average or mediocre person, would not unprompted do, for example, hold down their daughter at the age of 6, tear off her underwear and cut her genitalia with a sharp stone. They wouldn't do that if they didn't think God was telling them to do it, or the mullahs, or if it's a boy, the rabbis weren't telling them to do it. One of the reasons why I have the lurid subtitle I do, my book, Religion is a Poison, is that it makes ordinary moral people, compels them, forces them, in some cases orders them, to do disgusting, wicked, unforgivable things. There's no expiation for the generations of misery and suffering that religion has inflicted in this way and continues to inflict, and I still haven't heard enough apology for it.
Rabbi, you want to add something?
Christopher, I've got to call you down on referring to circumcision as genital mutilation. My son cried more at his first haircut than he did at his bris. And statistically...
You weren't doing it right then.
Statistically, the only long-term effect that it seems to have on people is it increases their chances of winning a Nobel Prize.
I can't find the compulsory mutilation of the genitals of children a subject for humor in that way, or flippancy in that way. Maimonides says very plainly that it's designed to repress sexual pleasure, to deprive a male child as far as possible of the opportunity of that. The full excision, not just the snip or the full mandatory covenant is fantastically painful, leads to trauma, leads to the dulling of the sexual relationship, and can be in itself life-threatening at that moment. We have the records, I can show them to you, of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds in the United States, boy babies who've died or had life-threatening infections as a result of this disgusting practice. That a person as humane as yourself can sit here and think of that as a fit subject for humor shows what I mean. Religion makes morally normal people say and do disgusting and wicked things, and you've just proved my point for me. Shame on you for saying what you just said. Shame on you for saying it about your own son, my God.
Let's move on.
Yes, let's.
What next? Cutting the labia of little girls. At least Judaism doesn't do that.
This is a question.
What if a Muslim was to say to you just now, my little girl cried more at her first haircut than when I cut off her clitoris? What would you think of me if I was to say such a disgusting thing?
Well,
remember, we are not talking about detail here. We're talking about whether religion makes people behave better or not.
Er hat sich oft zu Recht darüber mokiert, dass er ein Label für seinen Nichtglauben verwenden muss, da man ja auch keine Labels dafür hat, wenn man nicht an die Zahnfee, den Weihnachtsmann oder den Osterhasen glaubt. In seinem Buch The Portable Atheist spricht er mir aus dem Herzen. Die einzige Position, die keine kognitive Dissonanz in mir auslöst, ist Atheismus. Der Tod ist sicher, ersetzt sowohl das Sirenenlied vom Paradies als auch die Angst vor der Hölle. So lebt man sein Leben auf dieser Erde mit all ihren Mysterien, ihrer Schönheit und Schmerzen sehr viel intensiver. Wir stolpern und stehen wieder auf. Wir sind traurig, selbstbewusst unsicher, fühlen Einsamkeit und Freude und Liebe. Mehr gibt es nicht, aber mehr will ich auch gar nicht. Es hat seinen guten Grund, dass Christopher Hitchens auch heute, bald 6 Jahre nach seinem viel zu frühen Tod im Dezember 2011, von unzähligen Menschen schmerzlichst vermisst wird. Auch wenn es unter den Religioten so einige gab, die erfreut waren, als er seine Diagnose Speiseröhrenkrebs im Endstadium öffentlich machte, was einmal mehr die wahre Fratze der ach so barmherzigen Gläubigen zeigte. Er war ein Unikat, ein Charakter mit Ecken und Kanten, der auch zu seinen Fehlern stand. Als er einmal mit Scotchglas zu Bill Maher kam, hatte ich mich endgültig mit ihm identifiziert.
Right over here. Oh no. Let me help you with that.
Thank you. It's my dope substitute.
Is this your urine sample?
It's my dope substitute.
No. Chris, I love you because, you know, for years,
you.
people have been coming out on talk shows with alcohol and hiding it. Not you.
Not I.
They, like, put it in a cup like this. Chris is proud. He's like, this is scotch, fuck you.
Look, well, in the case of Christopher, it's far too late to hide it.
I just think it should be listed as a leading indicator. It's sort of one of nature's things. It's like mother's milk.
It so is.
And so much better for you than that dope.
You look great, by the way. I know you have been working on your health. Obviously not completely, but I've read about it.
No, the New England Journal of Medicine says at least 2 drinks a day for the heart and the bloodstream.
Well, of course, that's...
Auch Maher wusste dies einzuordnen und meinte, dass er diese Ehrlichkeit an Hitch schätze. Zig andere Gäste packen sich ihren Alkohol in die undurchsichtige Kaffeetasse. Hitch sagt, fuck this is Scotch, deal with it. Nicht viele haben den Mumm in den Knochen, so zu ihrem Alkoholismus zu stehen wie Hitchens.
We have a number of questions, curiously enough, about your favorite things. One wants to know things you can't live without when traveling. And one person, one well-informed audience member, of course, wants to know what your favorite whiskey is.
Well, I don't see what the difference between the 2 questions. The best blended Scotch in the history of the world, which was also the favorite drink of the Iraqi Ba'ath Party, as it is still of the Palestinian Authority and the Libyan dictatorship, and large branches of the Saudi Arabian royal family, Johnny Walker Black. Breakfast of champions, except no substitutes.
Dass sein Alkoholkonsum sicher seinen Teil dazu beitrug, dass er an Speiseröhrenkrebs erkrankte, dürfte klar sein. Aber er stand dazu und nur das zählt. Das macht ihn in meinen Augen nur noch größer. Und irgendwann demnächst werde ich auch mal ein Video zum Verhältnis unserer Gesellschaft zum Alkoholismus machen, weil es mir ein persönliches Anliegen ist. Ist euch mal aufgefallen, wie viele große Geister Alkoholiker sind oder waren? Alkohol und Intelligenz schließen sich eben nicht gegenseitig aus. Nein, ich denke, in gewissem Sinne begünstigen sie sich sogar. Wenn man den geistigen Horizont hat, zu begreifen, wie die Welt funktioniert und warum sie so funktioniert und wie einfach die meisten Probleme zu lösen wären, wenn nur der Wille da wäre, dann kann man das nüchtern gar nicht lange ertragen und muss zur Flasche greifen. Das heißt nicht umsonst, dumme Menschen leben glücklicher. Und nein, diesmal bin ich nicht abgeschweift. Jemand von Hitchens Intellekt muss doch kurz vorm Durchdrehen gewesen sein bei der ganzen Dummheit, mit der er stets konfrontiert wurde.
Why now? Why am I doing this now, people ask. Well, I'll tell you why now, because in the last few years it's become impossible to turn a page of a newspaper without being, as the religious would say, offended. In other words, I don't think I sound self-pitying if I say that I'm offended that a cartoonist in a tiny democratic country in Scandinavia, Denmark, can't do his job without a death threat, and that no American magazine or newspaper would reprint those cartoons, either to elucidate the question or in solidarity. I'm offended that civil society in Iraq is being destroyed, leveled by the parties of God. I'm offended that people in this country believe that they have the right to advocate the teaching of garbage to children under the fatuous name of intelligent design. I believe that we're... I thought you'd never clap. Just as I believe that where religion ends, philosophy begins, where alchemy ends, chemistry begins, where astrology ends, astronomy begins, and now the people will say, well, let's give equal time to astrology in the schools. It's nonsense, dangerous and sinister nonsense. The Pope says
AIDS may be bad, but condoms are much worse. What kind of moral teaching is this? And how many people are going to die for such dogma? You see what I mean?
Kein Wunder, dass er zum Alkohol griff. Und das Faszinierende an ihm ist, dass er selbst im angetrunkenen Zustand seine Gegner argumentativ immer noch in die Tasche stecken konnte.
Now, I am absolutely convinced that the main source of hatred in the world is religion and organized religion. Absolutely convinced of it. And I think it should be religion treated with ridicule and hatred and contempt. And I claim that right.
So when I say, as the subtitle of my book, that I think religion poisons everything, I'm not just doing what publishers like and coming up with a provocative subtitle. I mean to say it infects us in our most basic integrity. It says we can't be moral without Big Brother, without a totalitarian permission. It means we can't be good to one another. It means we can't think without this. We must be afraid. We must also be forced to love someone who we fear. The essence of sadomasochism. The essence of abjection. The essence of the master-slave relationship. And that knows that death is coming and can't wait to bring it on. I say this is evil, and though I do some nights stay home, I enjoy more the nights when I go out and fight against this ultimate wickedness and ultimate stupidity. Is it not the case that the spread of Christianity, about which you spoke so warmly and affectingly in your opening remarks, attributing it to the innate truth of the Bible story, was spread by that means, or because the Emperor Constantine decided to make Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire? Which, in your view, contributed more to the spread of the faith?
The Holy Spirit.
I rest my case. You give me the awful impression, I hate to have to say it, of someone who hasn't read any of the arguments against your position ever.
Er war einer der ganz wenigen wirklich großen Denker unserer Zeit. Was ihn von seinen Kollegen Dawkins, Dennett und Harris unterscheidet und ihn mit Abstand auf den ersten Platz katapultiert, ist seine schonungslose, unverblümte Art und sein Charisma. Die anderen drei können da leider nicht mithalten, wirken oft noch viel zu nett und zu diplomatisch. Hitchens nannte die Dinge beim Namen und wenn sich jemand idiotisch geäußert hat, ließ er diese Person das auch wissen. Leute wie ihn, kritische, freie Denker, müsste unser Bildungs- und Unisystem tausendfach herausbringen. Aber sie bleiben die Ausnahme. Warum das wohl so ist? Und wie wir heute an Milo sehen, dürfen kritische Stimmen ja noch nicht einmal mehr ohne Gewaltandrohung oder Proteste an Unis sprechen. Apropos, stellt euch mal eine Debatte zwischen Milo und Hitchens vor. Hitch hätte ihn zwar beim Thema Religion in seine Einzelteile zerlegt, aber das Thema Trump wäre ein verbales Feuerwerk gewesen. Und vom Christentum und Trump abgesehen sind die beiden ja in vielen Themen wie Islam, Rede- und Meinungsfreiheit, moderner Feminismus, Clintons und so weiter ja eigentlich einer Meinung. Auch wenn 2016 ein Haufen Leute gestorben ist, mit deren Werken ich aufgewachsen bin, ich vermisse niemanden so sehr wie Hitch. Jeden Morgen, wenn ich die Nachrichten durchgehe, frage ich mich immer wieder, was würde Hitchens dazu sagen? Wie würde Hitchens dazu stehen? Seine Stimme fehlt in der heutigen Medienpolitiklandschaft einfach. Und dass ich bei weitem nicht der Einzige bin, der dieses Gefühl hat, zeigt eines deutlich. Es gibt aktuell niemanden, der ihn ersetzen kann, der auch nur im Entferntesten in seine Fußstapfen treten kann. Manchmal habe ich das Gefühl, Vernunft und gesunder Menschenverstand sind mit ihm gestorben. Er war nicht nur als Kämpfer gegen religiösen Schwachsinn, sondern auch als Journalist eine Ausnahmeerscheinung. Doch bei aller schonungsloser Offenheit beherrschte er auch die leisen Töne und war auch demütig, wenn es einen Anlass dazu gab. Wenn ich das Video seines letzten öffentlichen Auftritts sehe, kommen mir schon bei der Laudatio von Richard Dawkins die Tränen.
Today I am called upon to honor a man whose name will be joined in the history of our movement with those of Bertrand Russell, Robert Ingersoll, Thomas Paine, David Hume. He's a writer and an orator with a matchless style, commanding a vocabulary and a range of literary and historical allusion far wider than anybody I know. And I live in Oxford, his alma mater and mine. He's a reader whose breadth of reading is simultaneously so deep and comprehensive as to deserve the slightly stuffy word learned, except that Christopher is the least stuffy, learned person you will ever meet. He is a debater who will kick the stuffing out of a hapless victim, yet he does it with a grace that disarms his opponent while simultaneously eviscerating him. He's emphatically not of the all-too-common school that thinks the winner of a debate is he who shouts loudest. His opponents may shout and shriek, indeed they do, but Hitch doesn't need to shout. His words, his polymathic store of facts and allusions, his commanding generalship of the field of discourse, the fork lightning of his wit. I tried to sum it up in my review of God is Not Great in the Times of London. There is much fluttering in the dovecots of the deluded, and Christopher Hitchens is one of those responsible. Another is the philosopher A.C. Grayling. I shared a platform with both. We were to debate against a trio of, as it turned out, rather half-hearted religious apologists. Of course, I don't believe in a God with a long white beard, but I hadn't met Hitchens before, but I got an idea of what to expect when Grayling emailed me to discuss tactics. After proposing a couple of lines of attack for himself and me, he concluded, "And Hitch will spray AK-47 ammo at the enemy in characteristic style." Grayling's engaging caricature misses Hitchens' ability to temper his pugnacity with old-fashioned courtesy. And spray suggests a scattershot fusillade, which underestimates the deadly accuracy of his marksmanship. If you are a religious apologist invited to debate with Christopher Hitchens, decline. His witty repartee, his ready access store of historical quotations, his bookish eloquence, his effortless flow of well-formed and beautifully spoken words would threaten your arguments even if you had good ones to deploy. A string of reverends and theologians ruefully discovered this during Hitchens' barnstorming book tour around the United States. With characteristic effrontery, he took his tour through the Bible Belt states, the reptilian brain of Southern and Middle America, rather than the easier pickings of the country's cerebral cortex to the north and down the coasts. The plaudits he received were all the more gratifying. Something is stirring in that great country. End of quote. Christopher Hitchens is known as a man of the left, except that he's too complex a thinker to be placed on a single left-right continuum. By the way, I've long been surprised that the very idea of a single left-right political spectrum works at all. Psychologists need many mathematical dimensions in order to locate the human personality. And why should political opinion be any different? With most people, it's surprising how much of the variance is explained by the single dimension we call left-right. If you know somebody's opinion on, say, the death penalty, you can usually guess their opinion on taxation or public health. But Christopher is a one-off. He is unclassifiable. He might be described as a contrarian, except that he has specifically and correctly disavowed the title. He's uniquely placed in his own multidimensional space. You don't know what he will say about anything until you hear him say it. And when he does, he will say it so well and back it up so fully that if you want to argue against him, you'd better be on your guard. We treasure his bon mots, and I'll just quote a few of my favorites. From the penetratingly logical, that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. To the cuttingly witty, everybody does have a book in them, but in most cases that's where it should stay. To the courageously unconventional, Mother Teresa was not a friend of the poor. She was a friend of poverty. She said that suffering was a gift from God. She spent her life opposing the only known cure for poverty, which is the empowerment of women, and the emancipation of them from a livestock version of compulsory reproduction. And this, everything about Christianity is contained in the pathetic image of the flock. His respect for women and their rights shines forth. Who are your favorite heroines in real life? The women of Afghanistan, Iraq, and Iran, who risk their lives and their beauty to defy the foulness of theocracy. I was asked to honor Christopher Hitchens today. I need hardly say that he does me the far greater honor by accepting this award in my name. Ladies and gentlemen, comrades, I give you Christopher Hitchens.
Well, I'm overwhelmed, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, and I did promise Richard that if my voice didn't go to rags, I would try and speak to you a bit, if that's all right. In acknowledgement, but I do so acutely aware that I'm the one standing between you and the Saturday night fever, and the bars and the entertainments and so forth. And also we have a Q&A, we hope. So I'll be terse. But at this present moment, I have to say, I feel very envious of someone who's young and active and starting out in this argument. Just think of the extraordinary things that are happening to us. Go, for example, to the Smithsonian Museum, to the new, I hope you've done it, to the new Hall of Human Origins. Magnificently curated new exhibition, which shows, among other things, the branch, or branches along which perhaps certainly three, maybe four if you count Indonesia, humanoid, shall we say, anthropoid species, died out not very long ago, within measurable distance of 75,000 years or so. Possibly destroyed by us, possibly not, we don't know. We know they decorated their graves. We think they probably had language ability. We don't know if they had souls. I'm sorry, I can't help you. We probably assume that they were deluded into having some kind of God. But no religion is yet pronounced on these cousins and brothers and sisters of ours, because they don't fit. There's no way of fitting them into the ridiculous story that makes this tape wind round and round again and replay it and lead to us, to the grand solipsistic conclusion that this whole thing is designed with us in mind. But what a wonderful thing to be starting out in this tremendous new field of endeavor. How fabulous it would be if you had a gift for physics, to get a job as an intern with Lawrence Krauss, for example, who's just beginning to unravel. There's very, very few people have yet dared to do the idea of the alternate and parallel universe. But in the meantime, we have the same job we always had, to say as thinking people and as humans that there are no final solutions. There is no absolute truth. There is no supreme leader. There is no totalitarian solution that says that if you will just give up your freedom of inquiry, if you will just give up, if you will simply abandon your critical faculties, a world of idiotic bliss can be yours. You will certainly lose the faculties, And you may not know as a result that the idiotic bliss is even more idiotic than it looks. But we have to begin by repudiating all such claims. Grand rabbis, chief ayatollahs, infallible popes, the peddlers of surrogate and mutant quasi-political religion and worship. The dear leader, the great leader, we have no need of any of this. And looking at them and their record and the pathos of their supporters, I realize that it is they who are the grand impostors, and my own imposture this evening was mild by comparison. Thank you very much.
Sein kurzes Gespräch mit dem 8-jährigen Mädchen und ihrer Mutter darüber, welche Bücher er dem Mädchen als Freidenkerin denn empfehlen würde, zeigt ihn von seiner besten Seite. Humorvoll und selbstironisch, als er feststellt, dass sie seinen Tipp schon gelesen hat, und am Ende prägnant. Mit diesem Clip möchte ich meinen Top 10 auch beenden. Ich hoffe, es war aufschlussreich und hat euch gefallen. Hitch, we miss you. Remember the love bit.
There's an author called Robert Graves, who wouldn't be far out of her reach, I don't think. There's wonderful tales of Greek and Roman mythology. Actually, the Greek stuff is pretty good.
I've already read those.
You've read all of them?
Yes.
This is getting worse and worse. She's floored me twice now. This is like the rabbis confronting Jesus outside the temple, you know.
Well, I was eager to meet famous freethinkers, and because I want to grow up to be a freethinker. My mom says I'm not, but I already am.
I really wish you well with this. I wish there were more like you. Actually, what would we do if there were too many? Lots of love. Take it easy. Remember the love bit also.